So, today we're going to ask the question, is God a monster? We're going to finish our sermon series by talking about misogyny, and if that is something that is condoned by the Bible. So let's bow our head for prayers. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to come up here today and to share. And I thank you for your leading in my exploration of this topic. And I ask that my words be yours today and that you bless us all. Thank you so much. Amen. So, is God a monster? So we have talked about this month, we've talked about slavery. We've talked about genocide. We have talked about the God of the Old Testament versus the God of the New Testament. And is he a schizophrenic God? Because does that match or not? Well, today we're talking about, is God a misogynist? Is he a sexist? Recently, I had a friend say to me that women no longer have issues with misogyny or sexism in the United States because we have the right to vote and there is a woman CEO of Facebook. So when I was given that statement, I thought to myself, that has not been my experience. I didn't really debate it with the person, because the person who said this to me was male, educated, but also somebody that I deeply respect. I didn't debate it at that time because I felt like I wasn't going to get anywhere. It kind of came across as mansplaining. And but since I respect this person, I wanted to see why there would be that thought. I mean, is that something that is a thought that's out there? So I agree that the United States is way ahead of other countries. It's illegal to beat your wife. Women have the opportunity to drive cars, and girls can go to school, and not every country is like that. So we are very blessed to be in a place where there is a lot of freedoms for all. But the evidence given to me was that women have the right to vote, and that there is a CEO of Facebook. Therefore, all women's problems have gone away. That evidence, I hear laughing, that evidence doesn't hold for me, because black men were given the right to vote in 1870, 50 years before women were granted the right to vote in 1920. As far as the CEO of Facebook, we've had the president of the United States be a black man. But I think few would argue that racism still exists. There's always that push-pull in these problems. So I decided to go out there and see, is this ignorance on the experience of women? And why would there be ignorance on the experience of women? Do we just not talk about it? Is it something that the Me Too movement has gotten rid of, that we stood up and now misogyny is a thing of the past? Are we all now woke? Has it gone away? So the approach I decided to take was to figure this out, was to just ask a bunch of women, what is your experience? So I decided to do a little research. I got some answers that were very interesting. 99% of the women surveyed said that absolutely misogyny and sexism still exist, but the experiences often differed in intensity. For example, an elementary school teacher in an environment that is predominantly a female-dominated environment had a different experience and a different opinion than an engineer in a predominantly male-dominated environment. Some answered that while misogyny still exists, that they have managed to seek out areas where they don't have to deal with it because they intentionally sought out churches, workplaces, and bosses where they didn't think it would be an issue. So some have been able to navigate around it. Some shared their experiences as cultural roles in their families, where boys and girls and men and women in that dynamic were not treated the same, and that there were two sets of rules growing up, one for the girls and one for the boys. Now, Miami is predominantly a Latin community, and you can see this at play because, there is a word in Spanish called machista. So you may have seen that in cultural roles also. When I asked another friend this question, she shared a conversation that she had recently had with a man, where he told her, well, first of all, let me tell you about her. She's a single mother. She is driven, and she is a hard worker to provide and build something for her family. So this friend told her that he hoped that she would find a man that was wealthy, that could take care of her so she didn't have to work anymore. But she's like, but that's not what I want. And he's like, what do you mean? Isn't that what everybody wants? Isn't that what every woman is looking for? And she's like, no, I want somebody to stand beside me and help me build my empire. She is looking for a partner to build a life with. I didn't just limit to my questions to women. I also asked men. I said, what do you think? Is there misogyny? Does sexism still exist? And I got answers that were yes. And when I asked, what is the evidence of that? They cited workplace differences in how women and men were treated in the workplace, roles of leadership in the work areas that they worked were predominantly male. So they could definitely say that there was something at play there. So what about roles in the church? And when I say the church, I'm not talking about these four walls and those of us sitting in here. I'm talking about Christianity in general. How have women that I interviewed found their identity in organized religion? One woman shared that she was told in a biblical context that a woman's role is to be dominated in a marriage, that her hopes and dreams must be negated to fulfill this role, and that the real priority was to support her spouse, his goals, and his desires. Marriage was accepting that a strong husband simply demands his needs. As she shared that, the statement she ended with really hit me in my gut. She says, but something inside of me continues to tell me that this is not what God intended. So what's the impact? When I asked the questions, I was like, what has been your experience? But then my second question was, how has that impacted you? Because that impact is a deep one. The words I heard were undervalued. I was sad that a sacred source, the Bible, was used to support the marginalization of women. I was discouraged. I felt isolated. I have apprehensions towards relationships. I felt a lack of support. It made me question my purpose. I struggle to feel that I have a voice in the church other than as a subservient worker bee. Because the Trinity is represented as male, I struggle to feel I have a voice or value there as well. Because the Bible is used sometimes to justify misogyny, women are questioning God. Do I matter to him? Because of this whole movement has risen up, because of this, a whole movement has risen up to put down Christianity as a whole, because it's an oppressor of women. The feminist movement has taken the pendulum to swing from looking for equal rights for women to punishing men for the sins of the past. But that's not the answer either. In the Bible, there's many stories of women that are not the greatest, women being treated poorly, and that is definitely an understatement. There's a lot of material there to work with where a feminist group could say Christianity is bad, the Bible is bad, because of fill in the blank with this story. So let's look at a story. Genesis 12. This is a story of Abraham, before he was called Abraham, he was Abram. It says, now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe. It came to pass when he was close to entering Egypt that he said to Sarai, his wife, who will be later called Sarah, indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. You're gorgeous. Therefore, it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they're going to let you live. So please say that you're my sister, that it may be well for me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, and she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. Now let's stop here. Raise your hand if you're married. Can you imagine what this conversation looked like? Honey, you're beautiful. That beauty is going to get me killed because you're too pretty. So I need you to take one for the team. You're going to say you're my sister, And then that way, they won't kill me. And it will be because of you. You are going to save me. So he's given her a no-win scenario. You can be so pretty that you'll kill me, or you can take one for the team, and then I will live because of what you did. How many of you can imagine that conversation with your spouse? How do you think that went? You think she's like, okay, yeah, okay, I'm going to take one for the team. What did that mean? She gets carted off to Pharaoh's palace. What was Abraham's end game? Did he have one? Was he like, okay, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to go, and then when we leave Egypt after this famine, I'll bust you out. I mean, what was the end game? Was there one? It's just like, bye, we'll see ya. Have a nice life with Pharaoh. Because guess what? I'm over here. I got some oxen, some sheep. I actually benefited from this transaction. So I look at that and it makes me laugh, because I'm like, how did this go down? Like, in what world is this a normal conversation between a husband and a wife? She took one for the team, okay? Then what happens is, the next one, I love this part. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh in his house with great plagues because of her in his household. But the Lord, but God, okay? God came through for Sarah. He had a plan for her. And it starts with, but the Lord, or you could say, but God came in and did that, okay? Now, you could justify and say Abraham had a right to be afraid, because maybe that was the custom of the day. I see a pretty lady, she belongs to you, I'll kill you to take her. But if you look in a few verses before, God had made a promise to Abraham. He said, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And you and all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Through you and in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It's just a few lines before. Now, obviously, we don't have a timeline here, but God had made a promise to Abraham that said, I will bless you, and I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. But yet he lost his sight on that promise and was like, oh, I got to fear for my life, and what I'm going to do is give my wife away. So God intervened on Sarah's behalf. Her salvation came through those two words that started out, but God. Now, we've established that this has happened. Do you think that Abraham learned from this experience? Hey, you know what? God did say he would curse those who cursed me. Look what he did to Pharaoh's household. In Genesis chapter 20, it happens again. And Abraham journeyed from there to the south and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur and stayed in Gerar. And he said to Sarah, his wife, of her, she is my sister. He does it again. And guess what? Abimelech, the king, goes and takes her. Can you imagine Sarah? She's like, oh, here we go again. Taking one for the team. Okay? But what happens next? But God. God came to Abimelech in a dream. And he said, you are a dead man. Because of the woman that you have taken, she is a man's wife. Now, of course, Abimelech justifies himself before God and said, I didn't know, I was deceived. And he is allowed to live. But God comes for Sarah. So, again, there are lots of things that show stories in the Bible. But in this one, I love it because God keeps intervening for his daughter. So I could take scriptures. We could go into Ephesians 5. We could dissect that up. Any of the stories that have been used to define a woman's role. And we could determine if it was condoned by God, if it was a cultural situation of the time, or if it was just criminal behavior. Because there's a lot of that in the Bible. But that would take more time than I have. And it would also not go to the root of the matter. So let's go where this all happened. And that is in the beginning. There is a fabulous quote that I came across by Pamela Milne. She wrote an article for the New York Times. It says, the story of Eve in the book of Genesis has had more profoundly negative impact on women throughout history than any other biblical story. For at least 2,000 years, it has been interpreted in patriarchal and even misogynistic ways by male biblical scholars and theologians. Early Christian writers depicted Eve as subordinate and inferior to Adam because she was created after and from him, and as weak, seductive, and evil, the cause of Adam's disobedience. Not only was Eve regarded as the mother of all living things, she was also held up as a paradigm for the evil that is inherent in all women, except for, of course, Mary, the mother of Jesus, who later became the paradigm for idealized womanhood. These concepts form the basis for later patriarchal Christian theologies of women. So, the story that I was told growing up was that, God created man and woman. All was good in the garden until Eve ate the fruit. She sinned. She gave it to Adam. He sinned because of her. Everybody is cursed. And now woman has to be controlled by man because of her role as a temptress. But is that what really happened? So we're going to go back to the beginning of the beginning. Genesis 1:26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Verse 31, it ends with, "God saw that everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good." And that was the end of the sixth day. Genesis 2 goes on to talk about the details of the creation of man and woman. I really like this part because everything up until this point was spoken into existence by God. But when he creates humanity, he gets his hands dirty, literally. He creates Adam from the dirt, and then he creates Eve from Adam's rib. I love the idea. In my research, I came across this, was that Adam's first relationship was with God. We know that. But so was Eve's. Because Adam was asleep when she was created. So when she comes into existence, it's just her and God. So they each have a relationship with their Creator, independent of each other, before they are united together. He makes Adam from the dust. There are those who will take this part of the story that will, from the beginning, that man was created to be superior to women. One of the reasons that they will suggest that is because man was created before woman. Therefore, he's superior to her. Well, goats were created before man. But we don't draw that conclusion, okay? It's because it's not biblical. I have a bat back there. Okay? Another fact or conclusion that is drawn is that, so they'll say, but goats aren't superior to men because creation of man was the crowning glory of God, of the creation story. Well, if then that's the truth, then Eve coming after was kind of like the icing on the cake. So which is it? You can't have it both ways. So then the other one is maybe he's superior to her because she was made from him. And I'm like, he was made from dirt. So what's the point? None of these things are biblical. They're not biblical, okay? So one of the things that happens is that when Eve is created, she is referred to as his helper. Sometimes it's translated to helpmate in the Bible, but when you go, and so that will be used to say, she's supposed to be his helper, therefore she's subservient to him. But if you go back to the original Hebrew words that are used of Eve being the helper of Adam, the words used are Ezer, and I do not speak Hebrew, so if I'm mispronouncing this, Ezer or Ezer, Kenegdo. And that is not translated as a subservient helper. So if you take the first part, Ezer, that word is often used for God in the Bible, such as in Deuteronomy 33:26, when he comes to help you in a battle. Okay? So it is also used in battles sometimes to describe one king helping out another king like an alliance. So it is a word that is rooted in not subservient help, but as in powerful help. So it's rooted in power. And then connecto means the same as or equal to. So people have translated this to mean different things, but some is like I've seen a power equal to man. I've also seen equal partner be translated as that. So that's what they were to each other. That's what she was to him. So I was reading this and I was like, remember my friend who said that she didn't want a rich man to take care of her, that she was looking for a man to build an empire with? She's looking for an ezer kenegdo. She's looking for an equal partner, someone to build a life with. That's biblical. So it says that they were both created in the image of God. Both were given the commission to reign over creation together and to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So what happened? So here we are, Genesis 3. Now, the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst... Okay, I'm going to read from here. She says, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, nor should you touch it, lest you die. And then the serpent says to the woman, you will not surely die. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasing to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. So, what was the serpent selling? Was he selling wisdom? Was he selling pretty fruit? Was he selling doubt in your relationship with God? He said to be like God. When Satan says, you will be like God, he is denying the fact that we're already made in God's image. So that's where he's like, let's put a little division in there. Okay? We were made in God's image and likeness. And yet Satan goes, don't you want to be like him? So we'll come back to that. Why did Eve sin? It says she was deceived in the Bible. Was she gullible? Neither she nor Adam had ever heard a lie before. She was deceived into thinking that getting knowledge was good and that the fruit would be good too. So she ate. Why did man sin? Did he have FOMO? Was he afraid of missing out on that when she ate, Was it for love of the woman over God? Was it because he wanted to be like God? That's what the serpent said. Don't you want to be like him? Did he act rebelliously? Was he whipped and he just did whatever she told him to do? Why did he sin? Well, we don't really know why Adam sinned, because while it says, because you heeded the voice of your wife, there are no details on what he was thinking. But the Bible does say he was not deceived. So this was a sin that happened on purpose. In the story, there is a dispute by different theologians when you translate it of, were Adam and Eve together? Okay. One school of thought is, yes. The reason they were together is because if you examine the Hebrew the Hebrew words for you that the serpent uses, it's plural. He's talking to both of them. And then also it does say to her husband who was with her. The other school of thought says, no, that he couldn't have possibly been with her because he wouldn't, since he wasn't deceived, he wouldn't have let her become deceived. But I don't know that we can put that on him one way or the other. The other is saying that, well, it says she ate, then this happened, then that happened, then she gave it to him. So we don't know what the timeline is. That those are successive actions doesn't mean that they all happened at once with him being there. There are some people's opinions out there that if Eve would have been the only one that would have sinned, that that God would have just gotten rid of her, created another Eve. That it was Adam's sin that really sealed the deal. That Eve was actually expendable. That, I think, is a sad thing it's probably one of the saddest things that I read, was that Eve was expendable. Because in reality, he could have gotten a new wife for for Abraham. He could have replaced Sarah, but he rescued her too. So that's really not biblically based, that Eve did not have value. So, the fall of man. When you look in the Bible, you'll see this part of Genesis described as the fall. A part of my research into this, I discovered a book called The Book of Eden by Bruce Fleming, which I highly recommend if you want to do a deep dive into this. It's so good. And one of the things that he talks about, he's like, can we just not call it the fall? Because it makes it sound like they stumbled or like they were fruit from a tree that just fell. He goes, this was an attack. They were attacked. Who was the deceiver? It says in John 8:44, Jesus says it. He was a murderer from the beginning. And when he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources. He is the liar and the father of lies. Some translation says he's the liar and the father of liars. He was a murderer from the beginning. So let's not get confused on what really happened here. This was an attack to kill. Okay? So what happens next? So God comes looking for them. In Genesis 3:8-13, it says, and they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord called God to Adam, and he said, where are you? So he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you that you should not eat? Then the man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me from the tree, and I ate. So God turns to the woman. What is it that you have done? And she says, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. God comes looking for his children. He knows what's happened. Okay? He comes looking for them. How did Adam respond to God's question? Who did he blame? Was this a lie, the way he blamed? Did he place blame where it should have been placed? Does this response tell us a little bit about his motives? Was woman his temptress, or was that a false charge? Did the blame belong on God? He said, you gave her to me. Who does he not talk about? There is no mention of the one that was attacking. Why doesn't he mention the serpent? So why did he sin? Was it for love? His response does not ring of love for his wife. Did he not want to miss out on the wisdom that Eve was seeking? Did he want to be God? Whatever his motivation is, he comes across here as a little defiant. So what is to be gained from portraying Eve as the deceiver and the temptress? Woman as the deceiver and the temptress. Does that take the focus off of where it really belongs? God interviews the man and the woman. When he is done talking to her, it is exposed that the serpent was the deceiver. Interview over. He does not interview the serpent. Okay? So, what happens next? So, Genesis 3:14-15 says, God turns to the serpent first. So, he's going to address all three of them. Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all the cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, hatred, antagonism, adversaries. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. In some translations, it says he will crush your head. I like that one the best. The serpent is the only one of the three who is cursed. I told you at the beginning that the version I was given was that we're all cursed because of sin. But if you look at this, the serpent is the only individual of the three that is cursed. The serpent is cursed. Man and woman are not cursed. God did not curse his children. But he gives the serpent news. This is the first time we hear the news that there will be a deliverer. It's the first time that God mentions his plan to save his children. He confirms also that the woman and the serpent are adversaries. She is not the temptress. She is not the deceiver. She is the enemy of the devil, and she always will be. Then God tells the serpent that the result of his ongoing war with his woman will be his demise. Satan attacks, but God has a plan for salvation, just like with Sarah. But God comes in and he saves. So now he turns to the woman, which is one verse, Genesis 3:16. You'll see that his address to the serpent is pretty extensive. His address to the man is pretty extensive, and the woman is between them, and it's very small. It's 11 words in Hebrew. And these words, I'm going to tell you, when I went into this, there are all kinds of misinterpretations. I put the New King James Version up because it's probably the most accurate to the actual Hebrew words. He says, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. That's it. These 11 words, this verse is, I feel like, one of the most misunderstood verses out there. I misunderstood it. It says, wow, the curse of woman. There's no curse word in here. He doesn't curse woman. Okay? So let's break it down. The first thing he says is he's going to multiply two things. He's multiplying sorrow, is the way it's put in English here. The word in Hebrew is itzabon. Itzabon. It's only used 3 times in the Bible. It's used once when he talks to Eve, once when he talks to Adam, in a moment where he curses the ground. Itzabon means sorrowful toil, and it's used when talking about cultivating the soil. It's only used 3 times. Adam, Eve, and when Noah is born, they talk about Itzabon, because they hope that Noah will relieve them from their sorrowful toil, because it's hard work in the ground. Okay? So he's giving her an idea and saying, okay, you're going to have some Itzabon in your life. When you go out, he's about to curse the ground. When he talks to Adam, it's going to be hard to get food, and life is going to stink in that aspect. And that's going to be a reminder, I think, of the consequence of sin. Okay? So I'm going to multiply Itzabon. So we got a little bit of bad news, but we got some good news. I'm also going to multiply your conception. After death, there will be life. After death, there will be birth. Okay? Your conception. So again, we're going back up to your seed and his seed. The devils, we're going to be adversaries. You are going to have conception, multiplied. Eve is going to be the mother of the rest of the world. Okay? Then he says, in pain, you shall bring forth children. I don't know if any of you have ever had kids, but the ones that have, if you talk to them, this rings true, does it not? He was basically telling them, well, you know what? I'm gonna read you something because I thought this was really good. Bruce Fleming, from that book I was telling you about, the Book of Eden, he says, very soon, Adam and Eve are going to find themselves outside of Eden, with the way back armed by angel warriors, with supreme urgency and maximum use of every word God instructs the woman. A few things have changed. Her mortality, the curse on the ground, and it's also her relationship with her husband. While her body is now subject to the difficulty and death, God does not curse her body like he does the serpent. He changes our coming about to her body because she is now immortal. And God is telling the woman that because she has a mortal body, when she gives birth, she should not think that she is dying when she feels the contractions of labor. Talk to somebody who's had a baby. Ask them if they felt like they were ever dying. Can you imagine if you were the one having a baby that has never had one before, nobody's ever seen birth, you are doing this for the first time, and that hits, you might think you're dying. So he is giving her some instructions. In the environment outside of Eden, Where God knows that man and woman will soon find themselves, childbirth will be different for the woman. She will give birth with a mortal body subject to difficulty and even death. Where God says that her husband will rule over her, that's the next part. So 3 things have changed. She's going to have pain in childbirth. It's going to be hard cultivating the soil. She's going to have some itzabon in her life. And then it talks about your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Okay. This one has often been also portrayed that God mandated that man rule over woman because of sin and her role in it. So let's talk about that. The question here is this line descriptive or prescriptive? Is God describing what's going to happen, or is he mandating it? Now, when God gave the creation mandate to Adam and Eve, he gave it to them. He didn't talk to the animals and say, these guys are going to rule over you. He told them, you go out and do this. If it was a mandate, most likely he would say that to Adam. Adam, I need you to take charge here. But he's describing to Eve, this is what's going to happen. As a result of sin, I created you both in image and both to reign. And the word he uses in the creation mandate to rule over creation is rada. Okay? Take care of what I've made. The word that he uses here, where it says, he shall rule over you, that's not rada. That's mashal. Now, mashal is used in other places in the Bible, and one of them is in Judges 14:4, when the Philistines are ruling over Israel. This is not I'm going to treat you well because you need a little moral guidance. Mashal is an ugly ruling, okay? So this is not a loving guidance of a person gone astray. This is one person lording over the other. God is telling Eve, this is what's going to be to come. You guys are going to have a power struggle, because that is what sin does. This is a dynamic of their relationship that is shifted as a result of sin. Okay? And frankly, we already see it when God asks Adam what happened, and he says, she who you gave me. There's already a dynamic that's shifted there because of sin. So now God turns to Adam, and he gives him his response. He says, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and you have eaten from the tree which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. Adam was not cursed, nor was Eve. The ground was cursed, and the serpent. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. He curses the ground. It's going to be hard. Life is no longer going to be living in the Garden of the Eden, picking the fruit, and living it harmoniously. You're going to have to work to eat from now on. He tells Adam about Itzabon. That's what he's talking about with sorrowful toil. He tells him about death. He tells him that his mortal body is going to die. This was a sentence for both of them. Eve didn't not die. She did not turn to dust. It's going to return to dust from which God made it. In both cases, God teaches the first couple what to expect, giving them insight into their mortality as human beings. So as the band comes up, my question to you is, does it matter that there are differences in interpretations of this story? Not if we get to the core of what happened. A friend once shared a story with me of when she was young and she first experienced the death of someone that was very close to her. Her father was sitting beside her, helping her process the grief. Father mentoring a child. And she said, why is death so devastating? And he said, because we were never meant to die. We were not meant to die. We know that in the fiber of our beings. That's why death is so hard. Remember the comment from one of the ladies that I interviewed, the one who told us that her entire reason for existence she was told to was to serve a man. And she says, but something inside of me tells me that this is not what God intended. The Spirit of God is still in us, calling us back to our divine calling and purpose. He's calling us back to our relationship with Him. In the beginning, God made humans in His image. All are created in the image of God with the divine breath of life. God has authority over all of our lives. By my obedience, I acknowledge His governing right in my life. By my disobedience, I declare independence from God. The serpent came and challenged the relationship with God. He denied we were made in His image, insinuating that God was keeping us from something more. At the root of sin is ego. It becomes about me. This is what the serpent was selling. Don't you want to be like God? No. He said, don't you want to be God? Because we were already like God. So ego took over pride, selfishness. That was all the attack, and that was also the downfall. When researching the sermon, my husband asked me a question. He said, what is misogyny if you take out women? And I looked at him and I said, power. It's about power. That's what it's about. This always has been and always will be about power. That was the sell. Do you want power? Do you want to rule over all creation? Well, no, they were already ruling over all creation. No, do you want to rule over all creation, humans included? Do you want to be God? So when you try to rule, marshal, over another human being based on their gender, their race, their language, their age, their economic status, their sexual orientation, their education level, their church affiliation, fill in the blank with anyone that you think less than you. If you think that you are better than someone else and that gives you the right to exert power over them, then you have bought what the serpent is selling. He's the monster, and you are playing on the wrong team. But our loving God sent a Savior. But God.